When people have 3 years of knee pain, and then I'm able to sort of wrap it in one session, or 14 years of groin pain and it's gone in a session. So, but it's also about them being open. So, for your listeners, whatever it is that they're trying to do, to really 100% in their heart believe and have faith, and that wonderful sort of one of my favorite angel cards is faith moves mountains.
Welcome back to Reconditioned with me, Lauren Backneen. Thank you so much for being here once again. And today's episode I recorded with an amazing woman called Pearly Montagu, who I was introduced to via Zach Bush, who has been working with her. And he said he's never come across such a powerful, gifted healer. And I was like, well, if he's saying that, then I need to get on board. And she really is a magnificent human with an incredible gift for healing. And my intention of this episode was, yes, to kind of talk about her journey of becoming a healer and what it is she's doing within her healing, but really to bring that notion that we are all our own healers and we are all powerful enough to heal ourselves. Because the objective, the intention of this podcast is not for me to just blurt loads of information at you and you follow what I say, but instead to give you the tools you need to actually be the master of your destiny, to take responsibility for your own well-being, to take ownership of your health without feeling the need to rely on external sources. Yes, we all need community. We all need support. I see a homeopath, and I have a naturopath if I need, and a herbalist, and I work with a craniosacral therapist and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, I'm my own healer. If I'm not deciding categorically that I'm healing, then I'm not healing, regardless of working with all the most incredible practitioners in the world. So, that was the intention of this episode, to show you really how to tap into being your ultimate healer. And her journey to, becoming a healer and tapping into her gifts of being able to see color in pain and in pathology is really interesting. I found it interesting just as a guide of how we can all kind of tap in. How is it going to show up for us if we're tapping into going more deeply into healing the physical body? What different ways can that show up for us? It shows up for everyone differently. And for her, it's through color, which I just find interesting because color is frequency and frequency is healing. So, it was a really interesting episode. I think that you will all really enjoy it. And just go ahead and enjoy this episode. And as usual, if you do enjoy it, please leave me a review. Please go ahead also and subscribe or follow the podcast, because the more of you who are actually subscribed, the more it gets seen by others. Which obviously helps us to share this information of holistic healing, share all this incredible knowledge that we're getting access to through all these incredible guests. So it really helps if you go ahead and subscribe. Also for you, that means that you get updated when a new episode drops, which is great, because then you never miss anything. So go ahead and do that. Leave me a review and share this with someone who you think it will help, or share any of the episodes that have really helped you before with someone. That's your way to pay it forward today, if this podcast has ever helped you. So that's it from me today. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to check out all my offerings on the website, laurenvackneen.co.uk. I've got so many workshops and freebies and all sorts of amazing things happening. And on the website, you can subscribe to my mailing list as well, where you'll get my full moon newsletter every month, which is a community favorite, as well as, other offerings and recommendations and tips and anything else that I might want to send your way. So thank you for being here. I appreciate you. Some of you may remember that towards the end of 2024, I had a bit of an inflammatory flare-up. Now, having been in remission for so long, it was quite challenging. And even with all my tools and the best practitioners at my fingertips, it wasn't shifting. And there were many reasons for that, but a friend told me about the energy enhancement system that has taken off like crazy in the States, but it had just opened in the UK. And I really was trying everything I could to heal, so I went to check it out. Honestly, safe to say, I've never looked back. And if you're suffering with anything from autoimmune conditions to mental health challenges, to cancer, even if your pet is unwell. Please stick with me for 60 seconds while I tell you what this incredible system of healing is. So EES creates special energy fields using scalar waves and biophotons that allow your body to return to a place of homeostasis and balance, because that's the frequency our bodies should be vibrating at when in a state of wholeness. These fields help to balance and optimize your body's natural processes, promoting healing and overall well-being. I've personally now had 2 daytime sessions and have also stayed overnight twice, giving my body 11 hours of recharging within the scalar waves. And all I can say, and my friends who I sent say the same, is I've never fallen into a deeper meditation or a more relaxed state than when I'm in there, showing me that it's absolutely doing something with my energy field, thereby promoting wellness. The energy enhancement system promotes the body's ability to detox, reduce inflammation, reduce pain, improve circulation, improve sleep quality, improve immune function. It regenerates cells and it balances the right and left hemispheres of the brain, which is why we go into such deep meditation when we're in there. And that's just the beginning. Guys, the body is designed to heal from everything and anything. And when it's synchronizing with the healthy energetic environment generated by the system, it can. They're based in London. I cannot recommend it enough. And you can get 18% off any length session by using code reconditioned18 when booking. That's reconditioned18. Just visit www.energyenhancementcentre.co.uk to book, or you can head to the show notes for all the links. I cannot wait to hear your success stories. And please note, EES do not make any medical claims. Pearly Montagu is a world-renowned healer with an extraordinary gift. Following a profound near-death experience, Pearly discovered her unique ability to see energetic trauma within the body and the resulting disruption of physiology and biology that occurs. The combination of this unique gift of sight, combined with her subsequent training in energy healing modalities, including craniosacral therapy, Pearly has developed her unique, groundbreaking technique for restoring healthy energy and biologic function. Whether working online or in person, Pearly's transformative approach is reshaping human biology and empowering each of her clients to their sovereign health potential. So thank you so much for being here to speak about this amazing gift of yours.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a real privilege to be here.
You're so welcome. So we're going to get into all of it in a second, but I always start this podcast asking every guest the same question. So I will do the same with you. What have you done so far today to support your wellness?
That's such a great question. I always feel like the way that we start our morning is the way that we start our day.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, my morning ritual routine is sort of sacrosanct for me. So I always try and start my morning, which I did this morning with is a very beautiful heart meditation. There's a lot of data and science behind it, which is only 8 minutes long, so it doesn't take too much time. But yeah, I started with a heart meditation, and then I went through all the things that I was grateful for, all the gratitude list and the things that I'm calling in just from the present tense. From that, yeah.
I truly believe when I say to people, when people go, where do I start, with holistic living, with, healing? And I don't think there's anything more powerful you can do to change your life than gratitude, than to start your day and end your day with gratitude. If you do nothing else, but you do that, it is so powerful because it literally changes your vibration.
I mean, I feel like gratitude is the secret ticket to life, because I mean, we could sort of go back and jump through so many layers and levels, but I guess in the last 10 years of being introduced to the spiritual side of life, and it's sort of just opening up my whole world, and then realizing actually there are so many different tips and tools. And when you start to dive and go into all the endless books, it's just sort of all saying the same thing in a different, and everyone's putting their own little spin on it. So you kind of get mixed up sometimes between the messenger and the message.
Right.
But the heart of it was actually just discovering that, it's rather like if I were to give you something and you were to be super grateful, I would want to give you more. and quite, in the opposite. And the universe works in the same way. And just realizing it's like this little sort of golden nugget to have in your pocket of just always operating from such a deep place of gratitude. And then just over my life, just seeing in terms of, neuro-linguistic programming, which is sort of mainstream manifesting today, which I've been doing for 10 years. And it's really just been such a journey of actually just seeing like one foot in front of the other, all these things which were my dream. And then like one by one, they started to fall into place. But it's only because every morning without fail, I, from the heart, I always say, I'm so grateful that I've got my dream little home in Ibiza. I have my dream little temple on the Greek island of Corfu, or whatever it is that, however big or small, it doesn't matter. It's about what's important to you on your canvas, however, whatever size that canvas is, it's what's good for you and what works for you and what's meaningful for you.
Absolutely. I also find it powerful to be grateful for things like not even the big, small things, like, the house I've got. I always say to my clients, every night when I get into bed, I'm thankful for just having a bed to sleep in or having clean sheets. Imagine people, or when I'm ill, I do this thing where I give gratitude for being able to be ill in a warm, calm, safe, clean environment. Like imagine people living in slums in India who have dysentery, but they're in a slum and they're not like in a comfortable bed with a nice clean bathroom, or, I find that really powerful to go like into gratitude when things are bad and to see and I remember I used to do that when I was healing from the arthritis. I used to go, okay, well, I can't use my joints, but what is working in my body? So I'm grateful that my blood is healthy and, my organs are healthy and I'm growing properly and all that kind of stuff,
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I haven't really thought about it quite like that. But what I really love is, because I'm lucky enough to travel to a lot of different places in the world, and I feel so lucky. I was born into a very stable home and a happy family. But then, when certain things in my life, like I worked in my early 20s in a refugee camp in France, just down in Calais, and for me, I wasn't there for that long, but I feel like in a small way, it was kind of one of the things I'm most proud of. And just to get that perspective, which happens every now and again, of just realizing how lucky I am and how blessed I feel, and to have the sort of stability, and especially with the craziness that's going on in the world, to live, partly in England, where it's fundamentally a stable country, and we have so much. Obviously, there's always the polarities of the good and the shadow, but there's so much that we have, that we're
totally
lucky that if you look at these different countries, that 3 to 5 to 10 years ago, there was so much stability and beauty and everything that's changed. So yeah, I think the perspective on things, especially when you're having a really bad day,
yeah, totally
valuable. Of just, when you're on the tube and buses and just tuning into people's lives and public transport, just with compassion of like wondering what their lives are like. And I think that sort of compassionate inquiry is really important.
Totally. And just a quick question before we go on. I'm wondering, because I'm just thinking from the perspective of my lovely listeners, your heart meditation, is that something you can share with us? Is that something that's available on YouTube or that's guided, or is that your own thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a guided meditation. I can send you the link.
Amazing.
So your listeners can benefit. But it's super beautiful, and I really felt like, I always have something that I'm trying to work on. It's like, how can we improve? How can we be better and, spread more light? And I think I did a really fascinating MDMA ceremony quite a while ago. And one of the things that came through with I don't know how familiar your listeners are with sort of MDMA in terms of using it as a medicine, but it gives such beautiful clarity, and you just get layers and layers of just being able to see things in a beautiful way. And one of the things that came through for me was that I need to open my heart, and, rather like what we give out comes back. And so I've just been reflecting, I've manifested these relationships with people that hadn't really opened their heart and didn't have that capacity, and just taking responsibility for the part that I played in that. And so I've been using this meditation, which hopefully your listeners can enjoy, just every night before going to bed, because before we go to sleep, like the consciousness that runs through your mind whilst you're sleeping, it's such an amazing strategic time that you can set up that consciousness, which then sets up your next day. So the last 4 months or something, it's been this really beautiful practice of like setting the intention, where intention goes, energy flows, and asking angels to help me to open my heart, and then doing this meditation. And yeah, just really noticing it shift in terms of how people respond to me. It's always like, it's rather like you can't notice your hair grow, but you can notice the way people change in terms of the way that they respond to you. And just seeing a mirror in terms of that my energy has been shifting, and it's all from this meditation. I really attest to that. So I hope it helps the listeners.
If you've chosen to listen to this podcast, I probably don't need to tell you about the importance of connecting with the Earth's electromagnetic field daily, a lot, if we want to optimize health. Spending more time grounding, i.e. barefoot on the earth, actually helps the healing process and boosts immune function. But the reality is that most of us just aren't outdoors enough to get the full benefits of connecting with the natural frequencies of the earth. Even our footwear blocks this connection. So what do? Well, enter earthing sheets. I have an earthing sheet in my bed from Roland Earthing, and I've not only noticed an improvement in my sleep quality, yay, but also an improvement in overall vitality. By sleeping on an earthing sheet, you restore the electrical connection to the earth that you miss out on by not being on the earth enough during sleep, replicating being grounded in nature. And it works best this way because our bodies repair while we sleep, and we're there for ages. So really, this is the most valuable time to maximize efficiency of your earthing practice. The sheets are made from organic cotton, and they just go under your bed sheet. And not just that, Roland Earthing donates 1% of all sales to Farmers Footprint, Zach Bush's amazing charitable organization, which really means a lot to me. Earthing sheets are also said to be really great for children with sleep issues and cognitive challenges. So all in all, I couldn't recommend these earthing sheets enough. And you can get a 5% discount by visiting rolandearthing.co.uk. That's ROWLAND earthing.co.uk. And use the code Lauren5 to get a great 5% discount off your first order. Well, we'll make sure to put it in the show notes so everyone has access to it. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. So obviously, just to give context to how you and I met, we met through the amazing, lovely Zach Bush, who I think just mentioning that will, assure people of your credibility. And Zach said to me, because I was, having my listeners know about the challenges I've had with my jaw, and I was going through this, immense pain in my jaw. And after Zach and I finished recording, he said, well, you got to speak to Pearly. She's been the most, profound healer I've ever worked with. And I was like, whoa, coming from you, that's saying something. So obviously you and I had a session, and I'm just really fascinated with how you work and how I found it incredibly fascinating. And this was something Zach spoke to me about just based on his perceptions of frequency, color and sacred geometry, and how he speaks about that. And I, work through that with my shaman in my shamanic apprenticeship. And so it's, being able to perceive color, frequency, in different ways to how the human mind can perceive those has been a journey that I'm on at the moment. So it was really fascinating to experience how you see pain and pathology in the person you're working with. So before we go into that, because that's obviously what you do now, how you came to what you do is quite interesting as well, because there is always, an origin story, a hero's journey to everything. I have learned that there is absolutely nothing that happens in life that is worthwhile without something quote unquote bad happening, something challenging, an obstacle beforehand. Anyone I have spoken to on this podcast, anyone amazing that I've met over the years who are doing amazing things, it's all because something else propelled them. And it's never when life is just stable. So can you take us through what it was with you that brought you to this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been such a journey and such a long road to recovery, which
I know all about that.
I'm still on. So So it started about 10 years ago, where there was sort of two different iterations of going through a sort of very painful experience of being sort of catapulted into just learning how to heal my body. And it started, first of all, in when I was around 25, and I collapsed in the street from not being able to breathe. And what happened was I realized that I was told I had high cholesterol, but I was 25, and so it was probably the only time in my life I literally burst into tears as the doctor told me. I had sort of 4 centimeter clot in each lung. And it had been a sort of perfect storm of I'd been on a contraception pill that had been thickening my blood. I grew up on a very dairy and meat diet, but I think dairy was the main reason that the cholesterol was high at such a young age. And then I'd had a knee operation, and you obviously don't move very much after the knee operation. And so the three things had sort of come together. So I then was catapulted into just realizing, actually, so I just thought, how can I help myself? Like, what can I do? Because I went to see a lot of doctors that didn't help me. And so I just thought, okay, I've got to work this out myself. And, we're our own healer. And so I went from a very sort of black and white meat and dairy diet, drinking alcohol, to basically being very strictly vegan and no alcohol, and just only using natural products. And at the time I had, when you don't really put all the things together of realizing you're actually really on the wrong track. But I had polycystic ovaries, my weight I couldn't manage, my skin was really bad, I had sinusitis that kept coming, I had tonsillitis, and then I had this blood clot experience. And so basically everything just went. It was this just amazing shift. And it's rather like Hippocrates said that food be thy medicine and medicine thy food. So I then went on this journey of educating myself on food. And then about 4 years later, I had this sort of next iteration of sort of life birthing me into something, a completely different path through a lot of pain, which was I was involved in something where I ended up in hospital, and I had a significant injury and a significant impact to my upper body, particularly. And from ending up, just waking up in the hospital, and I had sort of, the machines beeping and the needles and the tubes in my arms, and just making a promise to myself at that time that this wouldn't be something that would define me. It wouldn't be my identity. It was just going to be part of the rich tapestry of life. But I, apart from the initial bit of Western medicine being amazing, and it absolutely has a time and a place, and I really honor Western medicine, but I also realized over time, after doing the initial scans and the initial, blood pressure kept dropping, and the stuff that I just really needed help with from Western medicine. After that, basically for the last 10 years, it's been this journey of learning in a very holistic way, sort of ancient medicines from the East, and, reflexology and many others that actually I would heal from sort of more natural paths. And so it's been, it actually took me years to even understand my injuries, and realized that actually the biggest trauma that I had was actually to my nervous system that was so sort of on flight or fright mode after that, and was so just constantly on this sort of mode of like, when are we going to get hit again? And so I then, about 4 or 5 years later, I was in a really intense job during COVID, and I started burning out and just, crying every day. And, my weight, I was losing weight, I couldn't sleep, and I realized my thyroid was out of whack. But I love learning and growing, and I had been really inspired by reflexology. And actually, it was my reflexologist trainer who said to me before it was diagnosed by a doctor to say, your thyroid is out of whack. So it was kind of from just realizing I needed to take some time out and just to recalibrate and get back on my feet. I then ended up going to this Greek island, the Greek island of Corfu, where there's a beautiful Osho spiritual community during COVID. And that was really the place that I learned to heal. And so it was through physio, acupuncture, bioresonance, naturopath, energy work, then discovering plant medicine work with psilocybin. And I think probably one of the final huge things for me was, aside from Cranio, which is just such a beautiful thing, but it was also going to the jungle in Brazil and drinking ayahuasca for a month and doing 10 ceremonies. So that's kind of in a short,
a lot of ceremonies.
in a short form, that kind of more or less been my healing journey. And then the sort of next iteration of that is from learning to heal my own body and being really inspired by some of the different modalities that really move the dial in a meaningful way to me, that I then realized actually I kind of started with reflexology. And then I remember I had a client who just said, I really love your energy, and would you just try and work with my whole body? And I felt like, okay, let's try, just go on a very sort of conscious touch journey. And then it sort of built my confidence. And then subsequently later, I then started singing mantras, and I was doing so many sessions that I realized I was singing mantras for about 20 hours a week. And it felt like I had sort of upgraded, and it was suddenly all this light and abundance came into my life in a way that, just didn't really have anything to do with money, but it was just a really beautiful kind of seemed a reflection of like my energy had changed. And then like learning to open portals, which was really fascinating. And then starting to incorporate warm oil when I work with the body, which just became a sort of sacred honoring of someone's body. And then realizing in time that I started to see colors in the body. And so I would just be able to sort of tune in, and then realizing actually not only can I see colors, but learning how I could remove it. And then realizing I could also do it online. And then when people are sitting there, and then the sort of next situation of realizing I can also do it online when people aren't there, and I can just drop in and tune into their field, which has been fascinating for me. And so, and just so many different people coming into my field, and just working with people from minor to major illnesses, from anxiety to back pain to sclerosis to pneumonia to joint pain to ancestral pain to I find people have such a myriad of different challenges in their body that it's very rare for me to work on something that's the same. I think pneumonia is maybe twice is the only thing I've done again. But so for me it's like it's a privilege. It was a gift that was given through a lot of pain, but sort of managing to turn pain into purpose so that I can honor people in a meaningful way and give back. Which brings me a lot of joy.
When I was at the HEAL conference at Gaia in Colorado a few months ago, I took with me a jar of Wise Earth adaptogenic honey that I'd been using for an autoimmune trigger, and I left it on the snack table for people to try. On the second day, there was a group of producers and tech people standing around the table looking in awe about something, so I went over. Turns out they'd tried the honey. One of them said, "What the hell is in this stuff? I feel awake and alive for the first time in ages, and I only just took a half spoon 5 minutes ago." Then Kelly Noonan-Gores of the HEAL documentary, who was hosting the event, was like, "Give me some, I need a pick-me-up." This was at the end of a very long, amazing, but draining weekend. She took a half spoon and instantly felt revitalized for the rest of the day. Within minutes, all the incredible speakers, Gaia directors, engineers, everyone was taking this honey, and it was like the energy in the room up-leveled in a way I've never seen. I'm telling you the story exactly as it happened, which is why I'm bringing you this here on Reconditioned. Wise Earth adaptogenic honey was created in response to founder Daniel losing his sister to cancer. It uses traditional Chinese medicine and cutting-edge extraction technology to create a potent adaptogenic honey designed to combat the current leading health issue, chronic inflammation, which is how everything starts. It's helped people from all over the world combat challenges from lack of energy to digestive issues to hormonal imbalances and a range of chronic illnesses. It uses the absolute best quality honey as a carrier of adaptogens such as reishi, chaga, and cordyceps to enhance both bioavailability and taste, ensuring maximum potency and effectiveness. Mix it into your coffee, whack it in your smoothie, or just take it neat on a spoon. You only need a little bit a day for the effects to work. And as I've seen from those around me and my own experience, those effects are huge. So visit wiseearth.uk, that's WYSE, earth.uk for UK or .com for US, and use code Lauren10 for a 10% discount. So how can you go more deeply into the color side of things and how that shows up for you? Because, you know, one of the things that I'm really passionate about on this podcast and with all my work, really, you know, even in my membership program, I don't want it to be that people have to, you know, hang around for years and years. I mean, obviously it's great when they do and they're constantly on a healing journey. And if they want to stay, then that for that purpose of continuing their growth, but not because they're ever continuously outsourcing their healing and their growth from me or from whoever it might be. I really want to empower people to be their own healers. Can you explain, because I believe anyone can tap into this because we're all powerful beings, how the colors show themselves to you and what, you know, does a different color mean a different thing depending on the person, or like I'm really interested in the frequency of color.
So in terms of to answer that question, so when I start to drop into someone's field and I start to see the energy matrix, and then within the sort of lever point of how electromagnetic fields, the therapies work, and seeing basically where the biology is being blocked from returning to its original design. And so for me, with my experience, what happens is when I start to drop into someone's space, I never know what it's going to happen. Like I'll have a few data points because they've told me what they are asking for support with, but I never know whether the session is going to go left or right, or what I'm going to find or what I'm going to see. But what I find most of the time, the colors that I find in people's bodies are it's like black or gray, or that's some iterations. I remember I did a really fascinating session with a person who's going through the chemo cancer process, and she said she had agony in her leg, and it was an online session, and I found this what looked like an entity in a being that had claws, and that it was red, and that it was recent, and that was the only thing that came to me. So I shared it with her, and she said, "Oh, that's funny. My cancer chemo drug is called the Red Devil." But I think it's very much kind of rather like, so for me, it's like a muscle. It's like, you know, when you meditate, you're refining your mind, you're building that muscle. But with this, it just keeps getting stronger and stronger. And the more I can see, the more I can do, the more I'm able to do, just generally on sort of many levels. So I think what I would encourage your listeners to think about, which is, there's so much that we can create. And as sort of Napoleon Hill, who was one of the great minds of the 1930s, said, the only limitations that we have are the ones that we create. And so, you know, in terms of having massive dreams, or like you can achieve anything, or, you know, if you look at like Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, which is also reflected in my work in terms of all these spontaneous remissions that I'm starting to have, or, you know, which is medical lingo for a miracle. And so, you know, when people have like, you know, 3 years of knee pain, and then I'm able to sort of wrap it in one session, or 14 years of groin pain, and it's gone in a session. So, but it's also about them being open. So, you know, for your listeners, whatever it is that they are trying to do, to really 100% in their heart believe and have faith. And that wonderful sort of one of my favorite angel cards is faith moves mountains. And so I think it's about also being open to life. And I think if you're open to the signs from life, like you'll be guided on how to heal your own body, and all the different iterations of what that could look like. So I think with the colors, I think perhaps in a practical way, maybe to set your intention and see what happens, or maybe to set an intention, or perhaps you could do a meditation in the body in a certain part, and maybe ask life, or ask your guides, or your, you know, guardian angel, whatever resonates with you, to see if you can tune in and see a color. Like I would imagine, like around the heart, the archangel Shamuel, the archangel of unconditional love and light. So I imagine around the heart it would be sort of the pink, crystalline, like beautiful white light sort of light. So I think you could probably like play around with it in a sort of quite childlike, magical way, and just see what comes through, because yeah, it's something that just very organically like just came to me. And also living in places like Ibiza, where it's a very like the energy here is very strong. It's very much a portal. So if you live in these places, like, you know, it's just in in Costa Rica, and like Pachamama, they have these spiritual communities in its place where they have ley lines, and there's a reason for that. So if you're in these sort of energy vortexes, which just accelerates everything, then I think there's a lot that can come to you. Whereas if you're in maybe a slightly more city life with perhaps a high level of like, disconnection to nature and stuff, it's gonna sort of maybe just be slightly more challenging to get there, but you can absolutely still do it.
I also think there are some places where I live in England, and apologies to the majority of my listeners who are in the UK, but it's got a very flat energy is the only way I've ever been able to describe it. And I find that hard to articulate because not everyone always understands what I mean, but it's a very flat energy. When you go, there are certain places you go to, even seeing, people living in those places different, and it can be anywhere. And I think, yes, part of it has to do with the sunshine, but there's also a heavy flat energy to the UK that makes it hard to raise your vibration sometimes, which is why people in, working in spirituality or, but very, spiritual people do move to these places. And, why my shaman lives in Sedona, because, it's a vortex. So I completely get that. Equally, we are still very cosmic, powerful beings, and we can create our own realities. So we have to, and I think actually that's been a good lesson for me, creating a transformation in a place that's not so easy to do that, in a place that does have a very heavy energy, to be able to create a level of, I don't know, a change where at some point then I have the ability to move somewhere else, But if you can change and make a huge transformation and become a grounded being in London, you're doing well, So
I remember actually from working with Zach and just supporting his body generally, and just having some really fascinating conversations with him about how, like, in terms of understanding more of what I'm doing, because it's just such an intuitive flow and I'm just guided, and it's just whatever comes to me. But just realizing that actually what I'm doing is just removing, in terms of where physiology and biology occurs, I'm removing this energetic trauma that I can see in sort of very vivid colors, or sometimes it can even look like weapons in the field. It's kind of fascinating. But he was saying that actually it's our bodies that are actually doing the healing itself, and I'm just this sort of enabler that's just moving stuff around. And so just really there's nothing more powerful than the human body, and like the myriad of the infinite intelligence that sits behind our lives, and is reflected in just the myriad of different systems that are running our body that we still have so little understanding about, like the microbiome or the gut, or like, all these things. And it's just like nature does its things. And so if you trust and have faith in whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, then like you can absolutely get there where you're trying to go.
How much do you think faith plays a part in our healing? When you're doing a session on someone, how much does their own faith and belief play a part in what you're able to do?
I would say in a very black and white way, if someone is not open to the idea that I can help them, I will not be able to help them. And it would be so simple. And I wouldn't even do a session with someone on that basis. And that's very obvious to me from my experience. And you kind of see it. I find it really fascinating when you observe some people's lives. It's like we all have this radio show, this sort of channel that when you see people who are always busy, or some people who are always stressed, and some people are always chilled, or
right.
And it's all just being different of how we sort of just reiterate the sort of the story that we were born into, and often that's the rhythm that people run their whole lives on. So I think people can absolutely do it, and I think faith is incredibly important, and as I touched on before, my favorite angel card is like Faith Moves Mountains. So yeah, and I remember, I'm building a little temple on the Greek island of Corfu, in a little ancient olive grove that sort of cascades down to the beach with its own private beach, and it will be a center for healing and transformation with plant medicine. But that dream started 10 years ago when I had no money, no capacity to get there. But I held the vision in my heart, and I've also worked incredibly hard, but I've had total faith and like 100% belief that would happen, and one foot in front of the other, it's come to me. So yeah, I would encourage your listeners to have faith.
Yeah, I would say the same about my healing. A lot of people who listen to this podcast are on physical healing journeys, or emotional or mental healing. And I have to say that of all the things, it is the faith that has been the key part in my healing. Having, like you say, holding that vision and knowing that without a doubt you're going to heal, but not just that you're going to heal, you're powerful enough to make that happen, and seeing yourself in a healed body. And I think the key that took me a long time to realize, and this is what Joe Dispenza talks about, and this is why his work is so powerful, and it's very hard to do, and it takes such a long time to get to. Well, for some people, maybe not as much as hard as it was for me, is stepping into how will you feel when you get there. Because a lot of us, with very busy brains, which is me, I have a very busy, very active mind, which is always on the go. I'm not, like a naturally just can switch off my brain person. I've learned to kind of cultivate that over the years with meditation. But for those of us with very busy brains, it's really easy to kind of focus on, oh, but I want this. So in order for that to happen, this has to happen. And I'm not exactly sure how I want it to happen. Do I want to be there? Do I want to be here? Do I want it to look like that? What does my career look like when I've got it exactly as I want? And actually, we don't need any of that. It's just, how are you going to feel when you've got all of that? And that's such a key shift. For me, it's coming back to the idea of like the feeling of peace and freedom. And I think really, that's what everyone wants, right? Peace and freedom and a sense of fulfillment. And if you can tap into that, but so you have to have the faith, and that's where the faith element comes in, right. That you can feel like that. But it starts with faith. It starts with just this deep surrendering to, the universe, God, your own higher self, that can happen. And is happening.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like, in terms of what you're talking about, it's like a bridge, the mental bridge of working through. And I remember going on a course that, when someone says to you, name 3 experiences that really changed your life and really moved the dial. And I remember The Power of Now was one of them by Eckhart Tolle. But then I did this course, it was a neuro-linguistic programming course. And it was sort of, it was fascinating. But it was the first time that someone said to me, you can change your life. You can create anything you want. And here's a model of how you do it. And it was this exercise of you visualize whatever it is you're trying to achieve, whatever your dream is, whatever is important to you. You visualize it, so you hit all the different senses. So you visualize it, then you hear it, then you feel it emotionally, and then you feel it kinesthetically. And then you go through the tastes and the smells. And they sort of took us back to the mind is a little bit like the iceberg. So you have your conscious, which is the iceberg you see above the water, and then you have like the heart, the like 80%, like the heart of the how we work in terms of our mind, which is the subconscious. And they were saying to us, it was the subconscious is like the computer, the controls, the desktop that's running everything. And so they said, if you want to get something into reality, you have to get it into the subconscious. So for example, if I would say to you in a fun way, like, what's 2 times 2? We would both say 4 because it's an automated response because it's in our subconscious. But if I were to say to you, like, what's 14 times 19? We'd both have to sit here and think about it. And so because it's not in our subconscious. So it's like, you've got to just reiterate, and like reiteration is your friend. And this is why, like, every morning and every night, I have my gratitude rituals of the things that I'm trying to call in, with sprinkled with faith and a lot of humor, and trust, and just keep showing up and just keep doing the work. And yeah, and then slowly over time, if you just keep at it, then by the process of iterations and going through all the visuals and all the senses that I just spoke about, then eventually it will get in, and then life will just start to move, and then you sort of get into this beautiful flow of like, wow, okay, it's happening, great. And then it's just like becomes this positive reaffirmation of like a little whirlpool. So, yeah.
It's this funny like catch 22, really, isn't it? Because it's like once you see it happening, you're like, oh, it really was that easy. And but you needed to see it to believe it, but you have to do the work to get to the point where you, because I say it's like my Rise membership, so many of the ladies, we get the same response. Wow, I didn't know how much I needed this until I was doing it. And I'm like, trying to convince you that you need it beforehand is, the work that I shouldn't be having to do. But unfortunately, until people are in, they don't realize how much what they're getting is what they needed until they're in. So it's that thing of like, you just got to keep up the faith regardless, because once you're there, you'll realize just how much faith played a role, that belief, that deep, because what is belief anyway? It's just, it's you telling the universe that it's happening.
Yeah, from the present tense, which is
Right, exactly.
super key for your listeners. It's like, for example, because I coach and mentor people as well, which is, if you were to say, cars are not important to me, but if a car is important to you, and you're trying to call that in, you say like, I want to have this car, like the message to the universe is, I don't have it. That's
right.
why it's got to be, I'm grateful to have this car. And actually it's such a key difference that a lot of people miss. But the other thing that I feel is kind of important to flag, which is, sometimes you really want something and you really want it and you're calling it in and you think you're doing everything and it just doesn't move. And in the spirit of sort of divine timing, and also just trusting that, if something hasn't moved, it's because it's not meant to come to you, or it's not meant to come to you now. And it's,
right.
Especially now, I'm going through a time where it's like, I remember listening to that wonderful expression which I had on Oprah Winfrey show, which is, life and God doesn't shut one door without opening up another. And so kind of trusting and going back to having faith, which is like, there's quite a few doors at the moment in my life that are closing, and I'm just quietly observing that even the worst thing that's happened to me has actually been, like, in many ways the making of me, and it has been such an extraordinary journey of where I'm now able to heal people, and I'm working with royalty ambassadors, like Grammy Award, like pop stars, like some of the biggest people on the planet who really operate at a global level. But actually, the thing, it was always for my greater good, even though at the time it felt really dark. It was really, really challenging, and it really, I was mentally and physically pretty shattered. And it's taken me years to kind of get back on my feet. But actually, just remembering that when you have those moments of vulnerability and a lack of stability, or just remembering that actually things have always moved for my greater good, and actually you can always just get back on your feet, and you'll always have people who love you, and community is everything. And I think that's how we're supposed to live. And so, yeah, I think just to remember when you're in this sort of dark tunnel and it's not so hard to see the light, that there's a loving intelligence that's behind our lives that will always look for ways to support you.
Yeah, I agree. Do you believe anyone can be their own healer?
Absolutely. Yeah, I believe that we have so much capacity to move this incredible body that we were given to you. And rather, like you were referencing, Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, which is so deeply inspirational, and I'm sure your listeners know, but just as a quick thing, which was, he had a horrific accident. He was more corporate, like horrific accident, which really damaged his spine. And within something like 3 months, he made this extraordinary recovery. And it was all through, and he said it was the most challenging time of his life, of just every thought counts, everything that you do. And I always say to people when I'm working with their body, when I start to open the space, which is, the body will follow the mind. So, for example, in a fun way, like if you and I were to talk about pressure and being stressed and you were being observed by a doctor, your pressure, your blood pressure would start to increase. So it's really uh, just about trying to build in many, many layers of all these subtle things that are trying to support you just very holistically. And I find what I definitely work with the people that I sort of help, which is, you don't have to have had an accident like mine to get to the place where I am. But if I had known before what I know now of how to live in a way where, like, sure, I really had to fight for my mental health and physical health to get it back, but actually I'm much happier now than I ever was before. And that's because I've had to learn. It's like being happy is not an end goal. It's the byproduct of how we live. So it's like, what do you do every day to be happy if it's a challenge?
It's also a choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's our choices that create our realities and the filter of how we see the world. So it's like, every day I'll have like a cold shower and then I do my gratitude and then I'll do a heart meditation and I'll do some sugaring and exercise. And then, that's probably my morning routine, the hot or I'll swim, get in the water and swim. But yeah, and those are my things that just bring me so much joy, and it's got nothing to do with money. This is not a sort of a privileged thing to do. None of those things cost hardly anything. So those are the things I think that can really hold you and really, I've worked a lot with people who have depression, and those are the things that I think can really, really move the dial for anyone, really.
Yeah, I agree. I always say it's the small, simple things that nature is already giving you that really, like you say, moves the dial. Those are the things that start off the journey and really invite in vitality and health.
But I think it's it's the small things in everything, whether it's the relationships that we have. Relationships can be many things, whether it's a friendship or a business collaboration with perhaps a loved one or a partner. But it's the same. It's those little things that really long term will move the dial. And it's like, I think the question I would encourage your listeners to think about, which is, compounding interest is such a phenomenal thing if you look at it more on a sort of work thing. But with your health, I'm always working backwards from playing the long game, which is especially in Northern Europe, where seeing my family or my grandparents in England, and old age is a really unkind process, and it can be a really unkind process if you don't move your body enough, if you don't sort of eat the right food long term. And then, during lockdown, I was taken to this very magical little Greek island in Corfu, and seeing a spiritual community, which, there's nothing perfect in this world. There will always be shadow where there's light, but seeing and being so inspired by these sort of older Oshers and Yassins and the way that they lived, of like living in community. Every Saturday night they do dinner together, and then they're always walking to the beach, and then they're swimming and they're playing with the children in the community. And yeah, it was so, and they were doing yoga and they were so supple. There was no stiffness. There was like, one of them just died as he was walking to the beach with like so many plants in front of him. And I just thought that was so inspiring. Such an, genuinely inspirational way to live, of like, okay, you've got to move your body.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God, completely. When we see elderly people here and how society has how life in the UK has kind of how it treats elderly people, but also how the lifestyle has evolved over the years, that first of all, it's very cold, so it's hard for them to get out sometimes, but it's sitting at home in central heating, very hot, very artificial, with tea and cakes and sugar and, all the things that aren't necessarily good for us, a lot of non-organic food. And, so I think that, people as we know, elderly people in the blue zones are, thriving and walking and moving and out in nature. And that's the key. I don't know many elderly people in, especially in London, who get out in nature on a regular basis. So yeah, absolutely. It's all about the way we live, and it's all a choice.
But I was Dan Butner, who's the founder of Boozer, and I was chatting to him this week actually, and he was saying to me that there's a family in Sardinia who are the oldest family in the world. There's sort of 8 siblings who are collectively about 750 years old. And every day the first thing that they eat is, and it's in one of his books, but it's this sort of it's like a stew, which is like sweet potato and celery, and I can send you the link so you can put it in your listeners. But and there's that amazing woman called the Glucose Goddess,
Yeah, yeah.
all about, if you want to sort of do little hacks, one of them is like just your first meal of the day, just make it savory. And this is now like when Dad told me, I was like, well, if it's good enough for that, and that's what he does every day, and him, and it's good enough for me. And it's something that I feel is, and it's also really inexpensive, that sort of food. And it's so beautiful. And also, I remember from being really inspired from a friend of mine who has the most amazing skin and body, and he's in his late 50s. And I was asking him, like, can I please put in an order for your skin and your body? Like, what do I need to do? And he said, yeah, my food, I've been eating organic for about 20 years. And I was thinking, oh God, I don't know if I can afford to do that. I don't know if I can justify that. But actually, I think there's also clever ways that you can do it, which is, the clean 15 and the dirty dozen, which I'm sure your listeners know. But it's basically about fruits that it's really important that you eat organic. And then there's some fruits and vegetables that it doesn't matter because they're in a shell, like an avocado, for example. So the pesticides don't get in. So it ultimately doesn't come into your body. So actually, if you just shift like 80% of your food to the food that's okay to buy non-organic, for example, if you're on a budget, and then that way you can sort of just continue to just do the best that you can do with the environment that we live in, which has sadly a lot of toxicity in it.
Yeah, I say that to my clients a lot about clean 15, dirty dozen. And just to clarify, I don't think it's that the pesticides don't get into you at all. I think it's just less. Right. Like a broccoli, kale, blueberries, things like, well, broccoli and kale are some of the most toxic foods on the planet if they're not organic, because, the glyphosate and the other pesticides, really, really seep into the food so deeply. I mean, Zach has said that what he realized when he was trying to introduce healthy food to this kind of remote, rural, really low income, community in, I think it was Kentucky or something, he was giving them kale and he was like, why are they not getting better? And the kale was just laced in glyphosate. So, there are things like that, blueberries, strawberries, whereas, a pineapple, a banana, and avocado, not such a big deal. But that's not to say that the pesticides aren't getting through them at all. But yeah, it does give the option though to people on a budget to make the decisions in what they do. I always say if you're eating meat, meat should 100% be organic 100% of the time, for many reasons. The vibration of the animal is the first, and dairy, no commercial dairy is just full of, anyway, that's another episode in itself. But yeah, it's about the vibration of the food. But anyway, we can all be our own healer is the point. We can make better decisions in everything. And, you were talking about, it's a practice. And I think just to kind of end on that note of, it's a bit like intuition and what comes to you in meditation and channeling. I know that the more I do it, the more I'm channeling, or I'm kind of giving my higher self the opportunity to channel different things. And then I'll see like a symbol, and over time I can understand what that symbol means. Like if I see a specific thing, I know that I'm being guided to a specific thing, but that only comes with lots of practice and lots of, like you say, it's a practice that you have to cultivate. And I think, it's like that with any healing practice.
And ask for guidance. You can play with the universe. So, like, I want a really clear sign within the next 24 hours on da da da. And it's kind of fun when you start to see it, or like, it's rather like when you go outside and you're like, I'm going to only see yellow cars today. And then suddenly you only see yellow cars. And it's like, you can just put that filter on. It's like, okay, I'm only going to see abundance and opportunity. Right. And then it's like, you're just changing your filter, which changes your reality and it changes your experience. And it's just this kind of beautiful iteration if you kind of know how to play with it.
Yeah. One of my spiritual teachers said to me once, you can just ask for support, as in from your guides. I was like, wow, who knew? You can just like ask for support and actually you get it. And that's just a beautiful reminder that we don't do that. We just think we're all alone in this world. And there's so much support that when we incarnate here, we come in with all that support, and they're waiting. We have free will, so they can't get involved if you don't ask them. If you ask them, they will. So I love that. Pearly, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you and work with you?
Oh, thank you. So you can find me on my website, which is Pearly Montagu. And you can also find me on Instagram, which is under Pearly Way of Life. But yeah, I'll send you a link for the show notes. But
yes,
yeah,
amazing. We'll add all your info to the show notes so people can grab that there if you would like to work with Pearly. And thank you. I appreciate all your insights on healing and us being our own greatest healer. And I hope things continue to grow and for you in your work and how you're serving.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Reconditioned. I am honestly so grateful to each and every person that tunes in. Thank you also for taking responsibility for your own well-being. You should know that just by choosing to listen to podcasts like this that further your well-being, you're moving more deeply into abundance consciousness. Now, don't forget, I have a bunch of free resources over at laurenvakneen.co.uk, as well as every recommendation you could ever need in regards to your well-being on the LV Recommends page, all categorized for your ease. Thank you also to our sponsors. These episodes would not be possible without them, so make sure to check them out and get some pretty awesome discounts on the show notes. And of course, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that you can get updated each time a new one is released. Thank you. I appreciate you.